Hello, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Rabbi Hakins and Rabbi Zon for orchestrating this project, the Nichum Avelim project. Obviously, there's a need for it, and I hope that it'll bring comfort to many people. I find this to be a rather daunting task. We know that the prominent Menachem is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, as we say at the end of a Shiva visit, Hamokom Menachem Eschem. However, I will do my utmost with the tools Hashem has given me to hopefully help you also and give you some chizuk and Nakama along the way. Before I begin, I'd like to share with you just my own personal story and how I actually came to be sitting here sharing with you these thoughts. And I will share it with the Dvar Torah. My favorite phrase from Hallel is, Ma ashiv el Hashem kol tagmulahi alai. How can we repay you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for all you have done for me? So normally we translate tagmulahi from the term gomel, like for example, gomel chasadim tovim. We're thanking Hashem for all He has done for me. But there's another interpretation. If you recall, Avraham made a suda for his son Yitzchak after the bris milah, after he weaned him, biyom higamel oso, and the pasuk tells us biyom higamel es beno. It was the day that he weaned his son, using the same term, higamel, related to tagmulahi alai. So I realize when I'm saying ma'ashiv l'Hashem, I'm actually thanking Hashem for having weaned me. And I realize now, in retrospect, so many years ago, that Hashem did a pretty good job of weaning me some 35 years ago. I lost my father suddenly at a family gathering. I got married soon after, and I was expecting, and unfortunately, and I still get teary over this, we lost our first pregnancy when I was 7 months pregnant. And it was a very difficult time for me, I'm sure you can imagine. It was a loss of my father and this baby within a year, within 12 months. At the time, I was in social work school, and I basically made a neder to myself that afterwards, when I was qualified to do so, I would help other people who are going through a difficult time. And Hashem has enabled me, Baruch Hashem, give me many opportunities to help others. So I realized that 20 years later, I would say, Hashem weaned me at the time. He was saying, Miriam, dear, till now, Baruch Hashem, everything has gone okay, but forgive me, I'm going to have to make life a bit tougher for you. I want you to grow up. I want you to become more sensitive. I want you to be able to reach out to others. There's a journey you have to travel on. And these losses are going to project you into a certain journey. And we have to get started now. So it's now so many years later, I could thank Hashem for having weaned me, although it was so difficult at the time. But here I am now, and I've picked up a lot, just living a lot of life. But also I've always been a voracious reader, and I'm very eager to share with you many of the beautiful vertlach and thoughts and concepts that I have picked up over the years. So let's begin. I'd like to start first with the beautiful concept that Rabbi Chiel Spiro discusses in his beautiful Sefer on Tisha B'Av that you may want to pick up now in the summer. The chapter is entitled, What is True Nakama? And he tells us, very interesting, he quotes from Samson Fall Hirsch, who always discusses the etymology of the words. And to go back to the first time that Nakama is mentioned in the Torah, and I'm going to read from the Stone Chumash, it's referring to the Dor HaMabel. V'yar Hashem ki rabba ra'asa adam ba'aretz. Hashem saw that there was evil. He saw the wickedness of man upon the earth. V'chol yetzer machshavos libo rak kol hayom v'yinachem Hashem ki asa esa adam. And it's translated here, Hashem reconsidered having made man. And the next pasuk tells us, V'yomer Hashem emche es adam, I will wipe out the man. Asher barasem mi al pnei hadama me adam ad behema ad remes ad of hashemayim ki nichamti ki asisam, because I have reconsidered my having made them. It wasn't an Nakama for Hashem at that point that He had created man. He was disappointed in man. Rather, we are told to interpret the word Nakama differently. The word Nakama means that it's a time, an opportunity to reconsider, to reevaluate, to look at the situation from a different perspective, to reorient one's viewpoint. So that is really what Nakama is. It helps us to reorient ourselves and look at the situation, the difficult situation, from a different perspective. So I hope to share with you different thoughts today that would help reorient you and give you a different way of approaching a painful loss. But before we do that and share with more philosophical solutions to our pain, first we just have to talk about the fact that grief is a real process. There is a grieving process one must go through after a serious loss. Miriam Adahan, Dr. Miriam Adahan, a prolific writer, a wonderful psychologist, and a dear friend of mine, has written many books. Among her books, she's written many articles too, and among them there's a beautiful article called Good Mourning, spelled M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, that first appeared in the Jewish Observer, and she allowed me very graciously to reprint in this book called Saying Goodbye that I had the privilege of writing about 9 years ago or so. And she talks about grief as of the waves of an ocean. There are times it peaks when the grief is unbearable, and there are times when it dissipates a bit and you're able to get on with your life. But this is a process one has to go through, and one has to you must give yourself time to mourn before really starting to look at the loss from a more intellectual perspective. I'd like to mention this book also. It's interesting, I wasn't looking to write a book, and as I say, Hashem sort of propelled me on a certain journey. I began writing about 21 years ago, and this gentleman approached me, Dr. Neil Goldberg, who I work with in the A Time office, which is A Time stands for A Torah Infertility Medium of Exchange. I became involved in that because of the loss of my own pregnancy. And Dr. Neil Goldberg asked me to actually be a ghostwriter for him. And I said, well, what's the book about? And he said, it's about grief and mourning. So I told him I'd been collecting articles just for myself. When I had my losses, there was no support out whatsoever. There was no support group. No one was even there or available to discuss with me my losses. I was really very much on my own. My husband and I were totally on our own. So I was in social work school at the time, and I attended conferences in grief and bereavement, and I read everything I could find on the subject from the Torah perspective and from the secular perspective, because there was very little out there then in the Torah literature. And everything that I had collected then, and all the wisdom I picked up, all the hard-earned wisdom, is contained in this book called Saying Goodbye. If you take a look at the cover, you see two hands releasing a butterfly. Of course, we know the analogy that a man is here in this world, and the neshama goes up to Shamayim and becomes a butterfly released from its cocoon. But I question the fact that it was the images of a child's hands, and this book is not written for young children. And then I realized the truth is when we lose someone dear to us, we lose a parent, we're all young children who just want our father back. We want our mommy back, we want our daddy back. You know, deep at heart, we're young ones who just want the affection and caring, and we want to be with those whom we love. There's one final thought that I'd like to share with you before we really get into the crux of the matter. There's a beautiful vart from the Kotzker Rebbe. We say in Shema several times a day, V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha. Why on your heart? It should be, I would think it should be, the mitzvah should be, the commandment should be within our hearts, inside, biladav. Why al? So the Kotzker says so beautifully, if we learn the concepts, absorb them, put them on our hearts, and then when we need them, they'll fall in. But if we never learn, if we never hear these concepts, they're not there for us to absorb at the time that we need them. So even if you're not ready right now to hear these different Nakama, perhaps you're still feeling very raw, perhaps your loss is very recent, but still listen to them. You may want to take notes. There are some of them are really very, very insightful and words of wisdom that could be helpful for you. So you may want to even jot down ideas in the future, share them with your spouses, with friends, with siblings, because I really believe it's these concepts that will help bring healing. So I'd like to discuss with you a little bit of the Torah perspective on death. The Torah perspective is really a very positive one. In fact, we talk about this in our book, Saying Goodbye. I maintain that if we would talk about death in the elementary school years, when Avram Avinu dies or Sarah Imenu, that's the time to talk about it, when it's not so personal and it doesn't hit home and it's not so terribly painful. And if we become accustomed to the concept, it wouldn't be so jarring and so really horrendous when it hits home and it hits close. So Rabbi Zev Leff has a wonderful question. He asks, do you have a neshama? So of course you're going to respond to me, of course I have a neshama. And he would say, I beg to differ. You don't have a neshama, you are a neshama, and you have a guf. You know, we often forget, we get so carried away with our world that we forget that in essence we really are, the soul is who we are. It's the essence of us. We're the soul, not the guf. Someone who takes it further along is Rabbi Itama Schwartz. Actually, the book, he's unnamed. He has several svarim out. One is Da'es Atzmacha, getting to know yourself. And what he discusses in the Sefer, Da'es Atzmacha, is that man is primarily a neshama, not a guf, but a neshama. And he illustrates it in various ways that really hit home for me and very relevant. He says, for example, that if we see ourselves as a neshama primarily, then if we have a loved one who's living across the ocean, even if we're not with them physically, we can be with them emotionally, and we can have a soul relationship, even if we're not there together with each other in one room. In fact, I have a daughter who lives in California, and I called her one day and I said, Racheli, do you feel me? I'm there with you right now. And it was such a comforting thought for me to know that we're really together even though we're far apart. Lahavdil, when I was sitting Shiva for my mother about 1.5 years ago, Rebbetzin Ruthie Asaf shared with me a wonderful point. And we were discussing my relationship, and like many of us, there were many ups and downs in our relationship, my mother and myself. And Rebbetzin Asaf pointed out that whatever differences we may have had during her lifetime, at this point, now that my mother had reached the realm of being purely neshama, everything else just faded away. All the extraneous details that we would get caught up on were totally irrelevant now at that point. And she advised me that at this point to work on building a new relationship with my mother on a soul-to-soul level. And that was very, very comforting for me. So if we see ourselves as a soul, we can relate to even those who have gone on to a better world. My dear friend Chani Juravel tells over an incredible story. And she has a friend, a woman, unfortunately, who passed away recently. And towards the end of her illness, Chani went to visit her. And this young woman said to her, Chani, do you recognize me? And this was the end of her illness, and the truth is, Chani did not recognize her and said to her, you look a little bit different, but when you talk, I know it's you. I know that you're my dear friend. And this woman said to her, Chani, don't feel badly. I'm actually happy. When I look in the mirror, I don't recognize myself either. And that's when I know that who I am is not my face. It's not my facial features or my body. Who I am is something much, much deeper. It's my neshama, it's my soul. So that was a gift. This woman understood that this was a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help her understand that it's the soul that is the essence of who we are, and the soul will last on to eternity. And for those of us who have lost loved ones, there are so many ways we can still connect. I mentioned before how Rebbetzin Asaf suggested I connect to my mother on a neshama to neshama level, soul level. I know when I lost my father very suddenly so many years ago, it was really a wrenching time for me. And I was trying so desperately to hold on to him. I had his Sfarim, his Sefer Tehillim, his Siddur, but on a more physical level, I had his sheepskin gloves that I used to wear. I still remember walking home with my father from shul as a young girl, and we would walk hand in hand, and just it meant so much to me to have that connection with him. And by wearing his gloves, I felt that I was connecting with him again in a physical sense. And then at some point, I misplaced the gloves, and I was heartbroken until I realized, I said, Miriam, you don't need his gloves anymore. He's part of you. Who I am is so much who my father was. I really modeled myself after him to a great extent. And he's within me. He lies within me, and I no longer needed the gloves. I was able to connect with him on a neshama level. And that was very, very comforting for me. We just read last Parsha, in the Parsha last week, we read about the Kohanim. And Chani Juravel has a beautiful article that's taken from the Bina, July 2008. As I mentioned, I'm a prolific reader, and as I read items that move me, I pull them out, and if I hopefully file them away in the proper place so I can find them when I need them. So Chani writes beautifully about the Kohanim, that the word Kohen comes from the word lekavein, to direct. She's actually quoting Reb Samson Raphael Hirsch, who is always involved in the etymology of the words, of the origin and the source where they first appear. So he says that Kohen, his job is to guide us and to direct us in every aspect of our life. So Moshe Rabbeinu he understood that. And at the time when Aharon was dying, he was taken up, Hashem took him, he didn't die death as we know, but Hashem took him up to the next world. Moshe Rabbeinu asked Aharon, Tell me what happens. He was trying to understand this mystery of death. What is so frightening about the Misa is that it's the unknown, and the unknown is always very scary. So the Medrash tells us that Moshe asked him, Ma ata ro'eh, what do you see? And Aaron understood that he was not able to share the details of what he saw at the time. But he did tell him, and he said to him, again the Medrash tells us, Halavai kodem zaman basi lakan. Halavai, I should have arrived here even earlier. He found that the Olam HaEmes was a wonderful place to be. It was not a frightening place. It was not a scary place. Halavai, he had arrived here earlier. Rab Shimshon Pincus takes a further lesson from these words. He says that the transition from life to death is probably the most frightening transition that we will make in our lives, all of us at 120, please God. And there are many transitions that we come across. But if we can face this one with equanimity, as Aaron did, we're able to face anything that life throws at us. We have to understand it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we will be able to face it all with the tools HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. There's a wonderful line Mordechai ben David shared with us after we had that terrible Hurricane Sandy, and unfortunately his studio in Seagate was totally destroyed. And he writes here, I'm quoting from the Mishpacha magazine, "When I took stock of all the damage, and it was very significant, I called my Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Morgenstern Yerushalayim, and he said to me, Matcha, the important thing isn't what's left downstairs, but what remains upstairs. That's what needs to last." I think we all understand that we have to work on that which is eternal and not get so caught up in the world, the physical world down here. I'd like to share with you a fabulous article, Rabbi Aryeh Ginsburg, that was presented in the Mishpacha magazine, December 10. The article is called, "This is Not the Way It's Supposed to Be." You know, we all have an image of how we envision our life to turn out, and unfortunately very often we have detours or roadblocks, and it can be very disconcerting. So we discuss is how life is the way Hashem wants it to be. We each have a journey that we have to travel along. And he tells the story of the Chavetz Chaim that a very impoverished Yid traveled to Radin to discuss with the Chavetz Chaim his difficult situation. And he says he asked for a bracha, and he began by commenting, would it hurt if I only had it a little easier? And the Chavetz Chaim said, how do you know? Maybe it would hurt you if it was a little easier. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is kulo rachamim. Hashem is compassionate. Don't you think Hashem would make it easier for you if He could? Obviously, the reason He doesn't make it easier is because these are the best circumstances for you to be in. You have every right to ask for it to be better, but you cannot say that it wouldn't hurt you to have more. Then he tells also of the story Reb Sternbach was walking with his beloved Rebbe, Reb Moshe Schneider, and Talmud approached him for a bracha. And Reb Schneider said, what would you like me, what kind of bracha would you like me to give you? And the Talmud said, a life without any problems. Reb Schneider replied, a life without problems, that's not a bracha. There is no such thing as a life without problems. I believe like a definition of life includes the challenges that we go through. Rather, ask for a bracha that whatever challenges Hashem sends you, you should be able to cope with. And now here comes a line that I'm so enamored with, and he's quoting Reb Tzadok HaKohen, who says that we see our responsibilities in dealing with challenges, we see them in the very laws of nature. By seeing the sunshine in the middle of a dark, gloomy day, that's how we can manage to overcome our challenges and deal with them. He says, we each have to experience a spell of darkness before we see the light. The night becomes before the day, and the dark storm clouds fill the sky before we are blessed with the blessing of rain. So we have to realize that what's supposed to be, this is the challenges that Hashem has given us so we can grow. They're wonderful opportunities for us to grow and develop. Rav Matisyahu Solomon, the famed Lakewood Mashgiach, says, we need to put less faith in our efforts and more efforts in our faith. May I repeat that? We need to put less faith in our efforts and more efforts in our faith. So we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is challenging us to become stronger people. And Rav Yitzchak Kutner in Pachad Yitzchak Zecher Tzadik Livracha says that the level we can attain through our own personal Akedas Yitzchak surpasses any level that can be reached through other means. Truth is, we have the concept we're all familiar with, Masa Avosim and Labanim. As Avram Avinu went through the 10 Nisyonos, each of us also is faced with Nisyonos. And we have the strength from Avram Avinu, from Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. They created for us a reservoir of strength, of courage, of fortitude, of perseverance. And we're coming from very strong stock. We look at the generation that went through the Holocaust, how they rebuilt their lives. We have it within us to withstand the Nisyonos. We just to have the faith in ourselves and to be able to pick up the pieces and move on. And we are fortunate that there is so much chizuk out there for us. I'm thinking of the literature today. We have the tapes, the videos, and just the support from friends and family that really was not available so many years ago, 30, 40 years ago. Let me share with you another article by Chani Juravel, again from the Bina, again on Parshas Chukas, quoting Reb Matisyahu Solomon. When discussing the Para Aduma that we're reading about this coming Shabbos, Emetz Hashem, Reb Matisyahu Solomon discusses what a difficult concept this is, and of course it's a chok. And Rashi predicts that this mitzvah will be questioned because on surface it seems to be such a strange request. And Rashi says, Gezerah hi milfanai, it is a decree before me, ein lacha reshus laharher achareha. We're not able to probe further to understand the Para Aduma. We have to take it on surface value. And the Mashgiach says, Rav Matisyahu Solomon says that This chok, the para aduma, is very much akin to the whole concept of death. As we cannot understand the concept of para aduma, we can't question either the whole concept of death. Why a person goes, why his time has arrived. It's a gezerah milfanai. And Achani writes very beautifully that the deepest of exile that we're in is really the exile of doubt and depression. And we hope that the Divrei Chizuk will help bring us out of this particular gullus. And with all the Divrei Chizuk, we should be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with equanimity, because the nisyonos can be difficult and can be daunting. But there is a greater picture that we can't fathom right here. You know, I think to myself often that Hashem took Avram Avinu out and he showed him the stars and told him that your children will be like the stars of the heaven. And I've been studying and researching different analogies. One of the analogies is that ideally we have to be like the stars, rise above, so that we can see the world from a more global viewpoint. We can't understand what happens when we look at our life just from our more constricted, narrow view. But if we rise above, we can go up to the heavens and we understand that there's a rhyme and a reason to the world and the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the universe. We have to take ourselves above, out of the picture, and try to see it from a more global perspective. Another idea about the stars that really hits home for me too is that the universe is quite incredible. Hashem created the celestial beings, and they're orbiting, many of them are orbiting around up in the heavens. And what's incredible is that each has the orbit and they don't collide with one another. Each star has its own orbit. So too, each of us is a star. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us here with our own journey, the own orbit that we have to follow. It's like we're catapulted out into the universe and we have to follow our orbit, our destiny. And I won't collide with anyone else. Hashem gave me the tools that I need. My destiny is not going to interfere in someone else's. We each have our own journey, and replete with also all the challenges, unfortunately. When I go through an Isayon and I often think to myself, HaKadosh Baruch, okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you tested me, I hope I passed. Do not test me again, please. Enough, I hope I passed this test. There's a beautiful article, Rabbi A. Leib Scheinbaum, that appeared in the Yated, April 06, taken from the Pnimim al HaTorah. And he's talking about the parshios of Tzav and Shemini Vayidom Aharon, when Aaron had that terrible tragedy and the loss of his sons, and he was silent. He didn't respond, but he was silent. So Reb Scheinbaum talks about other Gedolim and other great people, how they dealt with their challenges. He talks about the Chavetz Chaim who lost a cherished son, Rabbi Avram. And he points out that the anguish the Gedolim felt is as great as our anguish. It can be as overwhelming, even as an Adam Hedyot. But they were able to transcend their personal emotions because they saw the total context. They understood that Hashem directs and guides world events, and all that occurs is a manifestation of Hashem's divine will. We too have to keep that in mind. Again, we have to see it from a higher perspective and realize it's a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, and this is part of the journey that we have to transcend. On this week's Parsha, coming up now, we're going to read Parshas Chukas. We're going to read the phrase, Zos HaTorah Adam ki yamus ba'ohel. This is the teaching regarding a man who would die in a tent. And I'm reading now from a beautiful Sefer, the Torah Treasury, Otzer HaTorah, from the Art Scroll Masorah series. Beautiful, beautiful Sefer. Very readable and beautiful Verdloch on each Parsha. And they ask the question, Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank asks, we're talking about the concept of death now with the Para Aduma, atoning for the Tumas, Hames. Why do we say Ki yamus ba'ohel, man who dies in a tent? Why don't we say a man who dies in his home, in a bayis? Rabbi Pesach Frank refers us to Koheles. Reb Shlomo HaMelech talks about man returning to his eternal home in the Olam HaEmes, and he uses the phrase, Ki holech Adam el beis olamo. When man goes to the house of eternity, beis olamo. Why here is it a tent? And they were referring to a beis olamo. Because we're referring to this world again is a temporary world. We started off talking about how we get caught up in the Gashmias in this world, and we have to keep reminding ourselves constantly that this is not the Olam HaEmes. We're living in tents, and the Chag HaSukkos, when we dwell in the Sukkah for those 8 days, it's supposed to reinforce within us that we're really living in a temporary world now. I'd like to quote now Rabbi Zriel Tauber, who has a phenomenal concept that he's sharing. This was an article taken from the Mishpacha magazine, April 13. A woman was discussing her years of childlessness that were terribly difficult, years of infertility. And Rebbe Zriel Tauber, in discussing this concept, the concept and the condition of childlessness, of infertility, had a beautiful thought to share with them. A woman came basically to cry, to mourn with him. And he said to her, or rather he addressed a whole group of childless women. He said, I am not a Navi, and forgive me, I'm going to read it, I want to get his words here. I am not a Navi. I cannot tell you if you will have children. But if you don't have children, please don't think of it as a punishment. You must have raised your large families in your previous lives, and now you are here on a different mission. Is that amazing? You must have raised that family in a different life. You know, the Zohar talks about the Gulgalim. We don't know, we can't understand, we can't fathom this world. But perhaps in a previous life you had those children that you so desire now. And we hope everyone should be gebench with children. When we have a difficult time in this world, we can remind ourselves perhaps we had it easier in an earlier life. And this life Hashem wants us to grow and to reach heights that we had not reached before. And therefore we're being challenged to strive for a higher level. Another beautiful thought I'd like to share, I read in a Bina magazine recently discussing Rebbetzin Rachama, who passed away. She was so beloved by so many people. And at one point she was having a difficult time. She had fallen and she fractured her arm. Her house had been robbed. Her sister Nebuch, Esther Stern, had just passed away. And she was crying out to her friends, what's going on? Why am I being punished? Did I do something so terrible? And she approached her nephew, Reb Moshe Aaron Stern, to explain to her what's going on. And he said to her very beautifully, he said, this is part of a gezerah for Klal Yisrael. This is not about you personally. And Rebbetzin Rachama derived tremendous comfort from that. Tremendous comfort. When we're going through a hard time, it's not always about us personally. It's not about me, Dafka. It's about the world. Perhaps that the world needs a tikkun. And our pain and our suffering will help bring a tikkun to the world. And perhaps it's a kapara for us, for someone else. But again, it's one of those things we cannot understand. This is the chok. The same as a paraduma is a chok, this is a chok. And we really don't have too much choice in the matter. We have to accept it and move on. Rebbetzin Leah Cohen is a very much beloved mechaneches. She has the initiator and the director of the Jewish Renaissance Center located here in my neighborhood. And the JRC was started originally by Rabbi Cohen and Rebbetzin Cohen, and also Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner, who unfortunately passed away at a young age, and it was a tremendous loss to all Klal Yisrael, but especially to the Jewish Renaissance Center where he taught on a regular basis. And what's amazing is that the last years, the last months of his life, when he was undergoing very difficult treatment, he continued teaching. His students had no idea that he was ill. Rebbetzin Cohen says what a bracha it was that he did not lose his hair when he went through treatments, and the women who sat in his class had no idea that he was undergoing such a difficult time. What's even more amazing is while he was going the last months and going through his treatments, he was giving a series of classes on dealing with challenges, which is really mind-boggling. And Rebbetzin Cohen talks about what a loss it was for her personally and to the whole Jewish Renaissance Center. And she was trying to understand, and this is from an article in a book called a pocketbook of knowledge and inspiration from Targum Feldheim. And she has a beautiful essay talking about death, but talking about Rabbi Kerzner in particular. And she asks, was this fair? Rabbi Kerzner was a melamed, a teacher par excellence who had an impact on so many people, women and men, young and old alike. Was it fair that he left this world so prematurely? So she says, it's not fair, says Rebbetzin Cohen, if your measuring stick in life is this world only. We can't measure life by the way we see this world. Reality for us today is our everyday lives. Intellectually, we know that there is life after life, says Rebbetzin Cohen, but this awareness does not participate in our daily reality. In truth, she says, life here is only a preparation for life after life, for life in the eternal word. We're all passing players in this world, and what we're doing is accumulating merit and working towards the next world. But what she says incredibly is that we might wonder, could Rabbi Kerzner have earned a better eternity if he had had more years here in this world? And says Rebbetzin Cohen, not so. Our earnings in this world to come, in the world to come, are based solely on the degree to which we actualize our potential. It's not about it's the quality of our deeds, not the quantity, but did we reach our potential? And Rabbi Kerzner obviously reached his potential within the short number of years, and he was taken. But what a loss for all of us. Says Rebbetzin Cohen that death is neither negative, it's not a punishment, it's not a negative, it's a night between 2 days, from this world to the next world. It's a corridor that will bring us to the next world. It's not easy, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not leave us alone. Hashem is here with us all the time, and Hashem also blessed us with the ability to invest in new relationships, to form new relationships, to extend our world even further, to find other vessels for our love, for our affection, to find others to guide us and to help us along the way. Let's go on to another beautiful article, this one by Miriam Maslin. I'm sorry, it's about Miriam Maslin, who is a doula in Eretz Yisrael and a grief therapist, an article written by Leah Geber that appeared in Family First in December 12. And Miriam Maslin worked, very sadly, she worked with young women, young couples in Nebuch who had lost stillborns or lost babies in childbirth. And she realizes that, or rather she realized that many women tried to deny the pain and move on. They tried to intellectualize the loss. And Miriam encourages them, we said this in the beginning when we started here, that we have to grieve. You go through a loss, you have to grieve. And she says in a very expressive fashion, I can accept that this loss has been given me to God with love, but still I can acknowledge that I am in pain. We must acknowledge it. I must honor both places in order to ultimately heal and come to a place of wholeness. That's a very profound concept. We have to honor both places, honor the pain, but also honor the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us this nisayon with love. A woman was having a very difficult time after the loss, and Miriam said to her, did you take time to mourn? And the woman said, no, she's too busy. She has anya, she goes on with her life, and she's working, and she has children at home. And Miriam said to her, take 15 minutes a day. Take the time to grieve. And the woman did so, and Baruch Hashem, it was very helpful to her, and she was able to move on with her life. And Miriam reinforces the concept we'd said before, that every woman has her own journey. All we can do is help each other along the way. Just as every star has its trajectory, its own orbit, every woman has her own journey. And we hope and pray that we shouldn't be tested, but what we can do is to be there and be enablers and help people to emerge from the difficult segments of the journey. We're told that every year we start the new year, again, Shana. The word Shana doesn't just mean a year, but it also means L'shanos, changes. And we just celebrated Rosh Chodesh. Chodesh means month, but it also means new. It means to renew. We are given the power, the creativity in order to be able to renew ourselves, to rejuvenate ourselves, and to start all over again, to renew ourselves. Rabbi Victor Miller says that very beautifully. He says that we go through lives, each of our lives is really a storybook. We go through different chapters in our lives, and every chapter has a potential within it for tremendous joy, for fulfillment, for growth. It's the transitions that are so difficult. The transitions from one chapter to the next, until we make peace with each transition. But once we've made peace with the new station in a life, there is certainly potential for growth and for much happiness. Let me quote now from a beautiful article. Again, only beautiful articles that I'm reading. This one is by, forgive me, I don't see the author here, but it's taken from the Hamodia magazine, saying that each of us were created, we're an Adam. The Maharal Miprag asks, why are we called Adam? From the word Adama. Here we're told that we resemble a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and we have part of the Chelek Elokami Ma'al within us. If that's the case, why do we refer to ourselves as an Adam created from the ground? So the Maharal tells us that what do we have in common with the ground? That we have pure potential. The Adama, when you plant the seed and you go through the whole process, you plow and you winnow and you water and you prune, whatever has to be done, there's tremendous potential for huge growth and tremendous development. So too with man, we have the potential to become great, and it's the nisyonos, the challenges we go through, that will bring out this potential. We're all pure potential. It requires great, great efforts on our part often. And he says the Maharal, through struggle and even through failure, a man can transform his inner potential into actual greatness. So when we're going through a difficult time, I think we always have to remember that this is part of the growth process. Hashem is watering us, Hashem is pruning us, weeding us, and this is a journey to help elevate us, This is a nisayon that we're going through. And the word nisayon, interesting, also contains with it, many of us are familiar with the concept of a nace, of a banner. We can hold up the banner that we have persevered. But it's also from the word nasa, to travel. It's a journey we're going on, a journey through the different chapters in our lives. An article I read just recently, again, had a huge impact upon me. I mentioned before, I'm a voracious reader, and I can't encourage you enough to go through the literature that we have today. And a woman wrote an article just recently, and this showed up in the Family First, December 12. The author, as told to Leah Geber, she writes what a difficult time she was having. What was her nisayon? This woman dreamed of a big family, and unfortunately, because of medical reasons, she was not able to have a large family. And it was she was in mourning. On her own level, she was in mourning. And then she started to read. And she realized that there's an entire library out there, which I'm encouraging you all to delve into. There's a whole library dealing with suffering and how people emerge from the suffering. They emerge through the darkness, through the nisyonos, into a place of great light and radiance. So she began to read, and she realized with such a profound thought that, and I'd like to quote her, "My struggle became another stitch in the tapestry that is our nation's history. It was a chance to personalize my relationship with Hashem." When we go through nisyonos, we're really bonding with our imahos, with our fellow women, because we're all in this together. None of us can emerge through a nisayon on our own. We need to consult with others, we need the courage from others, and as we go through a difficult time, we may wonder to ourselves, what is the purpose? Perhaps we're the role model for others. Perhaps we're the ones who are creating a reservoir of strength for others to delve into in order to strengthen themselves. So we're approaching the end of my little talk here, and I want to just review with you several really tough concepts, but major concepts to reinforce before we end off. I want to mention, but before that, there's one more item I didn't talk about. The fact that grief is compounded and really very much complicated when there is unfinished business. I experienced two very major losses in my life, and we know that death is very much a part of life. As birth is, so is death, and as we get older, our parents reach the age, they reach 120, if not earlier. I lost my father very, very suddenly, and there was no time for me to say goodbye. There was no time for any closure. There was no time to ask mechila, and it was painful for me, the fact that I had never had a chance to express my absolute adoration of my father. My mother was ill for a long time, and I saw her basically fading away, which was very, very painful. They say that there is a grief that takes place, prolonged grief, when a person goes through a prolonged illness. That was a grief in its own right. And my mother, I did have a chance to have closure, and I really made a point of taking the time to ask for mechila, to express my affection, and really do a good job of the closure. So I would have no regrets afterwards, no qualms, no unfinished business. And I'd like to share with you something extraordinary. Kadosh Baruch Hu had given me a wonderful, wonderful concept that I was able to share with my mother. And this really made the world of a difference to me as we ended our relationship in this world on a more physical level. Our relationship had not always been ideal, and I was very much determined to end off on a very positive note. And I really davened to Hashem to help me find this positive note that we were going to end off on. It should be a natural ending to our relationship. I mentioned before Miriam Adahan, Dr. Miriam Adahan, who has long been a mentor of mine. And her book, Raising Children to Care, sat on my bedside table for years when my children were young. And she has a line that resonated within me. And she would ask, or rather she would say, within our families we'll often have one child who challenges us perhaps a bit more than the others. And this child, you might say, Kadosh Baruch Hu, this is a child I davened for, this is the one I dreamed of for years, this one? And her answer is yes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu would say, yes, Miriam dear, this is a child your neshama needs. You need this child to grow and to develop. So it was basically the last week of my mother's life, and I shared this idea with her. And I said, Mommy, I know our relationship hasn't always been ideal, but for me to be the person who I turned out to be, it's obvious that you have been the absolutely perfect mother. I needed a mother exactly like you. You have been perfect for me from day one. And my mother, although her eyes were not open anymore at that time, and she really wasn't verbal then, she smiled. And I said to her, and I went on, and I said, Mommy, even more than that, even if you thought I wasn't the perfect daughter, I was a daughter Hashem wanted you to have. So in actuality, I have been the perfect daughter for you. And every day till the end of her life, I reminded her and I reassured her that she had been the absolutely perfect mother for me and how much I loved her and how much I learned from her. And this was a huge bracha Hashem gave me personally, that I was able to have such amazing closure and that there's no guilt and no qualms afterwards. There was no unfinished business. So again, this is not always an easy task to undertake, but there is a bracha when there's perhaps a prolonged ending, that you do have an opportunity. And when someone dies suddenly and there is no chance, that is a difficult time for the family when there was no closure whatsoever. So when we do have the opportunity perhaps to think about it and contemplate, take the opportunity to express one's affection. And the truth, one doesn't have to wait till the end, of course, to express one's affection, to ask mechila, even to say vidya. I'm told that there are gedolim who would say vidya every single day of their life, never knowing if they would wake up the next morning. There was no guarantee for any of us. And perhaps the most important message of this entire session, this entire project, when we discuss grief and bereavement and discuss moving on to the next world, is to teach us to appreciate the value of life. The Kotzker Rebbe would say that it's a great accomplishment to be Mechaye Mesim, but perhaps it's an even greater accomplishment to be Mechaye HaChayim. You know, there are people who are living but are not really alive and not living vibrant lives. Hashem gave us life. It's a bracha. We wake up every morning, Moda Ani Lefanecha, to use our time well, make each day count, don't count the days, make each day count, and make sure our lives are meaningful and full. We should enrich our lives with relationships, with Masim Tovim, work on our midos. We have a really major task to perform in our lives. In terms of bidding farewell to a loved one, I just want to mention some aspects that might be important to cover. First of all, it's an opportunity to express appreciation and thanks, to ask for forgiveness. It's an opportunity to express one's assurance to a loved one that those who remain in this world will be okay. Very often, elderly parents need the assurance. They're afraid to leave us, afraid that perhaps we won't manage on our own. But to assure them that they have been such wonderful role models and have taught us so well that as much as we will miss them, we will be able to manage in this world, that could be a wonderful chizuk for a parent and will give them tremendous Nakama as they journey on to the next world. I imagine we might want to assure our parents we will be shomrei mitzvos. We will keep the Torah to the best of our abilities. You know, it's really a bracha to have this opportunity for closure. So I hope those who have the opportunity can do so. And referring back to the Kotzker Rebbe, we have the expression, we say, v'chai bahem. We really must live with the Torah mitzvos. And v'chai bahem means really to have a vibrancy to our lives. We shouldn't live lives just on a low, quiet, even keel, but sometimes we need the vibrancy. We need to have a life. We have b'machayeh to mechaye hachayim. So in closing, let me review with you. First of all, I hope that I offered you here Divrei Nakama. Divrei Nakama meaning offering you a different perspective on looking at the loss. For again, the only one who can really offer pure Divrei Nakama is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But I hope that I and others who participated in this project were able to open your eyes and help you see from a different perspective. I would like to suggest that we see ourselves, those of us dealing with loss, and again, it's really all of us, because everyone at some point in their lives is going to be faced with loss and trauma. We should see ourselves playing a larger role in this world. Perhaps I'm a mentor for someone else or a role model. Inadvertently, people will look up to you and see how are you coping. Perhaps we are adding to the reservoir of strength and hope and courage in this world by facing an nisayon with equanimity. Perhaps we're increasing the level of spirituality in this world. We can see ourselves acting upon the precept of Masa Avosim and Labanim. Avram had gone through Nisyonos, we too are going through our own Nisyonos. We're following, this is a pattern that was set before us many, many years ago, and we are following the same pattern of dealing with Nisyonos. After all, this is life, and we just segue along this journey from one chapter to the next. Perhaps our role in dealing with loss is to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. If we accept an Nisayon with equanimity, and we're able to, of course, to grieve first, but then to rise above our pain, and to use the pain as a stepping stone in our Avodas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or to turn this pain into a meaningful act in our own lives, to grow through it, we will be creating a Kiddush Hashem in this world. And then I would like to suggest that we be creative in meeting our own needs. We have to keep expanding our world. We have to keep learning, davening. There's so much out there. And I just want to I'd like to review with you some of the books that were very helpful to me, and I'm sure will be helpful to you also. There's a book I'd mentioned before, Da Es Atzmacha, that people find very, very helpful, getting to know yourself. The beautiful Sefer by Rabbi Yitzchak Kerzner called Making Sense of Suffering. And I believe this is taken from the series of lectures he gave while he himself was very, very ill. Very powerful book. I'd like to recommend the book that I had co-authored together with Dr. Neil Goldberg called Saying Goodbye. I believe what's very valuable in this particular book are the essays in the back. These were the essays that had helped me to a tremendous degree when I had experienced my own losses and I had absolutely no one to talk to and minimal support from the outside world. These essays that I was given permission to reprint were exceedingly helpful. There's another very powerful book by Lisa Aiken called Why Me God? A Jewish Guide for Coping with Suffering. I'd like to recommend also by Shoshana Rube, Forever With Me. Shoshana had written about the loss of her own mother, dealing with her illness and her passing, very powerful. Gesher HaChaim is a classic written by Rabbi Tukachinsky, dealing with the passing from this world to the next, seeing this world just as a bridge to the real life. And of course, I'd like to mention The Neshama Should Have an Aliyah, probably the newest of all these books, which has had a profound effect upon many families, turning the loss into a meaningful act in their families, helping to elevate them to the next level. So just a couple of pointers. Just every Shiva is different. There's so many determining factors. Is it the death nebach of a loved one who was ill for many years, and was it a long drawn-out illness? Was it an elderly person who passed away? Or was it nebach, a young person who died suddenly? It does make a difference in how the mourners will react. So keep that in mind when you enter a house of Shiva and the needs of the mourners. I'd like to mention that I feel that from my own experiences that in the Shiva home, sometimes there's a Shiva house where there are hundreds of people coming and going and a huge amount of action. There are other Shiva homes that are quiet, where they really appreciate when people come and sit for an extended period of time. So take that into account. If you're in a home where you see there's a tremendous amount of traffic coming and going, you could sit for your 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but don't overstay. Please at some point get up and allow others to take your place. It is often disconcerting for people who may travel a large distance to come to be Menachem Avel, who never get a chance to even talk to the Avelim, because those in the front just sat there for a half hour, an hour and a half, which I've actually seen happen, and can be very painful for everyone involved. Besides giving time is an issue, but also, I believe, space. One shouldn't sit on top of the Avelim. Sometimes we just crowd on top of them and physically it becomes uncomfortable. And a friend of mine, Nebuch Husat Shiva, recently told me that she had horrible neck aches because people stood over her and she was on this very low chair, creaking up her neck the whole time, and just physically it was so uncomfortable. So we should take into account the physical comfort, besides the emotional comfort, also the physical comfort of those who are in Avelim. I understand that there are certain communities where they set certain times, perhaps between 12 and 1 the family takes a break and the community knows do not come between those hours. I think that would be very, very helpful if they would institute such a concept here in New York, also in other communities, because if it's a long day and sometimes people are sitting there from 8 in the morning literally till midnight, and you do need a break once in a while. People need to, even again health-wise, physically, they need to stretch their legs, they need to use a restroom, they need to eat something. And it's not comfortable to eat in front of people. Sometimes it would really be a tremendous chesed to the Avelim to allow them that space to be able to stretch their legs and move out for a couple of minutes. I would like to suggest that in terms of Nichum Avelim, one can also send a letter, sometimes having something in writing, and to be able to put together a folder afterwards, a portfolio of letters expressing Nakama is incredibly helpful for the family. We all know that the Avelos is not over in a week's time, and to be able to open up letters and to see words of Nakama, concrete words of Nakama, can be so incredibly comforting for the family even after the fact. I see that in some homes they will put out a notebook and ask people to write divrei Nakama, to write them into a notebook, so afterwards the family can review it and again derive the comfort they need when needed. I'd like to suggest also that as the Avelos is not over, maybe the formal Avelos is over in a week, but those who have had a serious loss need comfort for weeks, months later. If you can call on a regular basis, drop in and visit. and offered concrete help. Don't say, call me when you need help, but say, can I help you, do your grocery shopping today? Can I help with the children? Can I do carpool for you? Whatever is necessary to be there for them. And just last night, I met up with Mrs. Sarah Freund, who's a therapist, and for many years she's been working with children of Holocaust survivors. And she asked me to share the following, and which really applies to those who are in Avelos also, that it's one thing, you can read a book, you can watch a video, you can attend a workshop, but the most important thing for those who have suffered a loss or trauma is to talk it out, is to have a chance to talk, to express their pain, and then to receive the validation that they need. And again, the need for this doesn't end after a week. So to be there to validate their pain, yes, it's beautiful to send the books. I think a beautiful gift would be, for example, to give the Neshama Should Have an Aliyah is a beautiful gift to give those who never lost a loved one. But to carry it out further, to call up after a couple of weeks saying, I'm here, can I come over? I'd love to chat a bit. And I found with my losses, when I lost my father, when people would bring up my father's name, even for years later, I would cry. But I loved it. I loved it. I wanted to hear about him. I craved the opportunity to talk about him. And again, I've learned a lot from my own losses. So I hope that I've been able to incorporate everything I've learned and to be able to help others through this particular journey and transition in life. And with all this, we all pray that we should not be faced with nisyonos of any sort, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring Mashiach Tzidkenu. We should be reunited with our loved ones and only be able to greet Besuras Tovos and only happy tidings to share with one another in the future. Thank you.